Hey everyone, it has been a while, but I thought I might come back and break down one of my sci-fi environments which I made in Blender, seeing as most of you guys are using that. There's a lot of parts to it, there's a lot of sort of cheating methods to make it look like it's more detailed than it really is, with textures and stuff, and we'll dive into all of that, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. So this is pretty much what the scene looks like without any post work. If we come out of here, yeah, it's pretty much a big fog cube. There's a couple trickeries going on with some buildings which I masked out for the background and stuff in Photoshop and then added them in here. And there's a couple assets which these ones are from a pack, I think, but some of these I created as well. So yeah, if we just take this fog out, I guess what we'll cover first is the, oops, that's not what we want. What we'll cover first is the building. So without the environment, this is sort of what it looks like. And these buildings, or sci-fi mega structures, whatever you want to call them, they're all kind of made up out of these pretty simple shapes. So if we take these out, you can see there's nothing really too advanced going on here. But the way we kind of trick it and make it look like there's more detail than there really is through the texturing. So if we go up here and bring this up, you can see this is really just a cube that's had some modifications done, so like slight bevels, like nothing too fancy. And then that's layered with other cubes with more slight bevels and layered with other cubes. But yeah, if we dive into the textures and bring this asset up here, we can see that what I've done is I've mixed a bunch of albedo maps, and what I'll usually do is the albedo maps that I usually take are usually like concrete or just metal textures, anything that really looks like, I can sort of bring it up. So this is like a collection set that I have. It can be something like this. You can really find it on Google. This one's really low res, but for example, it still works for texturing because you'll tile it, you'll mix it with other textures and stuff like that. And I find for building stuff in a lazy sort of way, like this, where it's just a cube, I find these work a bit better than, for example, your standard like texture of dirt, where it's non-tileable or tileable and stuff, but it has less of this like large scale sort of detail. So it's more of like a large scale texture, I guess, in the way that I use it. And I'll sort of combine and mix these with noise textures depending. So yeah, I mix this with a noise to break up the variation, because obviously seeing these are just images, they do tile pretty easily. And then I'll make some color adjustments and then bring this through a roughness. So this is a textures.com roughness map. I'm sure it will be one of the ones in here. Probably something like this. It's really a bit situational for the scene. But yeah, one of the main parts that also add to this like level of detail is there's these cool sort of sci-fi maps. I think it's from locationstextures.com, and they're pretty much, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, they're by this guy called Yakib. I don't know, I think he listed them on location textures, but pretty much what these are like these cool sci-fi patterny textures. And the way I like to use these are for various things. Sometimes I like to add them into the metalness, and then you get these sort of glint highlights of metal popping through. In this case, what I did is I took one of these textures, tiled it a little bit, and then if I play around with the tiling, you can sort of probably see I plugged this into the alpha. So that means that using the color ramp to sort of adjust the values, I can sort of map out based on the texture what parts will be transparent and what parts will be like visible. So what it does is it creates these sort of cool patterns mixed inside the texture that look like there's been lots of sort of tiny modeling in the building where there actually hasn't, seeing as just the texture driving it. So that's one way I do it, and then I sort of just repeated this texture. Oh, hopefully this is in the right spot. I sort of just repeated this texture throughout all the buildings or throughout all the assets, and then sort of kit bashed a lot. So there's, as you can see, there's some simple shapes where I just quickly modeled for the scene. There might be some models in here which I've modeled previously and then brought them back in. And then I think there's a lot of like slum models as well. So yeah, these ones aren't using that texture, but I've sort of kit bashed these in to create more detail. From this angle, doesn't look that great, but when you zoom out, you know, it's detail that the audience, I guess, doesn't observe that closely. So it works in this case. So yeah, that's pretty much it for like the building and texturing, and you can kind of just mix it how you want. I'd highly suggest that you use reference as well, just for shapes and stuff. I think I was looking at the time a lot of the creator stuff, the movie creator, The Creator, and they have these really cool mega sci-fi buildings, kind of similar to this, where it's very like brutalist. So then for the lighting, I believe this is just an HDRI or an IBL. Can check unless I added a sun, which I did not. Okay, so yeah, pretty simple. Literally just an HDRI at 0.5 and rotated in a way that I feel like looks nice. A lot of the time you'll find that I light a lot of my scenes sort of shadow side. So like, see, this is in the shadow and this is in the shadow, and you can see the shadows, and pretty much that always brings out a lot of detail. Not too sure why, but it's just how I found that it's worked a lot. And also showing this bright side on this building, which really kind of draws the attention in, composition wise. So then for the lighting as well, I've then covered this with fog to sort of sell the scale, because obviously it's very unlikely that in a mega sci-fi city like this that just remove this, that the buildings will be this clear and everything will be this clear and that there's no depth. So, you know, adding fog and atmosphere, in this case it's a lot, it doesn't have to be this much, even just a tiny bit can really help sort of sell the scale of your scene if you're making a larger scale environment, and it just sort of scatters the light a lot nicer than just having nothing there at all. And in this case, I believe that I also had a bit of a challenge where I didn't want to model too much because I was pretty lazy. So what I did is, so if we look at the image like this, there's these sort of empty spots here, and it kind of destroys the scene. It kind of makes it look like it's incomplete, or you notice that it's a 3D scene. So what I've done is I've taken these two planes, and in Photoshop I have cut out the alphas. So I like pretty much went with the select tool and then deleted all the parts that were like the sky and stuff, so we just have the buildings. And then if we jump back to the texture here, I just plugged this in, color corrected it, and then plugged it into a color ramp into the alpha, and that pretty much hides the transparent parts. And so for like a small detail like this is a really nice trick as well, because you really can't notice that much. Let's see if we can see, because they're really such a background and a non-hero asset that it really works for background stuff to do this trick. But I suggest for, you know, more foreground things, obviously you want to be using geometry. It'll look a lot better most of the time. Yeah, and we also have these holograms, which are just images. And as you can see here, the method that I use, so as you can see here, the method that I use is just the image itself, and then I did the color ramp trick. It's pretty much a different variation of the color ramp trick. So normally I would just go plug this into the alpha, and then it would hide the black parts of the image, which sort of causes this like illusion that it's masked out when it really sort of isn't. But just having the image like this as a hologram does work. But what I've found is you can get a cooler result by adding a checker texture. So all I've done is done the same trick that I'd normally do by plugging straight into here, but just adding a mix node and then offsetting the factor with a black alpha, meaning transparent. It creates a sort of checker texture on top of the already masked out alpha, if that kind of makes sense. So what you get is the masked out alpha of the image, and then also this sort of hologrammy checker texture going throughout it, which is like a very small detail, but I think it does help for when you preview this for the scene itself. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the breakdown of this scene. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will try to answer them in the comments. My process for creating the scenes for any scene really is usually pretty much the same, but occasionally, depending on the environment, I'll add a new technique or go more in depth, depending on what I want to make. But yeah,